Well, I'm Rick Fleeter, and what I do now is I teach aerospace engineering design, and design in general. In the 80s, I started AeroAstro to popularize the use of small satellites and to validate the use of small satellites, because we were certainly using them in AMSAT, but they were considered toys for radio amateurs to, play around with. They weren't considered valid things to do business, to do science, to do defense. That was, we wanted to put small satellites in a lot of users' hands and show that these things were really useful, really economical, really reliable, and try to overcome these millions of barriers that they were built with Radio Shack parts and they were unreliable and built by amateurs, and all these negative perceptions of small satellites, and try to move that technology to validate that technology. So I did that from the 80s, and before that I worked in the big satellite industry, really. I worked on TDRS and other defense satellites, large satellites. So I kind of got a feel for what's that world like before I evolved or revolutionized myself out of it. What design is, I use the following analogy. If you want to make something in the kitchen and you take a recipe, right, for cookies, right, and you mix to the ingredients flour, water, eggs, oil, chocolate chips, and you mix that up per the instructions, you make cookies, you're not a designer. You're an artisan, right? You've made something with your own hands. If you take a bunch of ingredients out of the refrigerator and say, I wonder what I could whip up with this that would be edible, and you come up with something and you think, wow, that was actually really cool. I might do that again, or maybe I'm never going to do that again, or maybe I'm going to do it again, but I'm going to do this differently. You're a designer. And that's what design is. It's taking elements and putting them together in a new way. And anytime you do that, you're doing design. So if I want to be a microsatellite designer, what I happen to do is take an existing radio, take an existing antenna, take an existing idea like a CubeSat. So I already have the shape. It looks like everybody else's CubeSat, but you can still be a designer because you're putting it together in your own way to do your own thing. And so you're a designer. It's not that hard, right, to be a designer. You just have to go into the kitchen without a recipe, but with ingredients, and put them together in your own way. It's kind of unbelievable, to tell you the truth. Why is it unbelievable? Because space is filled with people who love it so much that they'll do it for the sake of doing it. And so they basically spoil it for the business people because they're willing to do it for free. So how do we get paid to do it? And space is filled with people who have dreams of doing very, exciting things in space, but don't have the technical ability to execute, or even to realize if that idea is executable or not. So there's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of various people saying, I can do this, I can do that, I can do these. And those stories that they actually themselves believe are much sexier than reality. So in order to start a company, you somehow have to sell what is a little bit too obvious. Because we were selling just the idea of making little satellites fairly inexpensively, and nobody doubted that was possible, right? And what other people were selling was hotels on orbit, and so you go to venture capitalists and that's it? All you're going to do is build a little, 100 kilogram, 50 kilogram satellite? It's not impressive. They're funding much more impressive stories of people who are going to go to asteroids and mine them. But as an engineer, I couldn't do that, because I really don't know how you'd go to an asteroid and mine it, and I don't know what you'd mine there, and by the time you brought it back, if you could bring it back, if it'd be worth what it cost to go there and bring it back. So we were selling, in a way, reality, and reality is one of the hardest things, to sell. So those two factors made it a little bit difficult to do that. And I think, in a way, what made it work was that while we didn't have the sex appeal of going to an asteroid, I happened to have an acquaintance at that time who did start a company to go to an asteroid, but we were real. And the space business is very conservative. And in the end, they respected a group of people who actually did it, built the satellite, launched it, worked. And in the end of the day, when a person wants to buy a satellite, it's a big commitment. It's not just like buying, a magazine. You know, it's years of your life, it's millions of dollars, it's a launch, it's highly visible, way beyond the dollars. So somebody who's going to step into that spotlight wants to work with people who are actually credible, actually competent. And there was nobody else in this microsatellite business. There are a lot of people talking about microsatellites, but they didn't have that. You know, I had a background in space, I had the PhD, I'd done it before, worked with AMSAT. So what we lacked in, the whole team was very credible. And I think what we lacked in sex appeal, we made up for in kind of solid. You know, we were reliable people who were serious about what we were doing. I'm an optimist except for one detail, which is I think the time constant for improvement could be very long. And I hope I live long enough to see certain things, you know, happen. But I actually have faith in the fact that we are growing up in a generation of people who have much more access to communication, who see what the world is like, who can realize that their own situation in their own country is not what it should be, because they have a basis to compare to. They can see what other countries, how they operate. And I think that grassroots force, we don't want to live like this anymore. People can eventually, given a generational turnover, can change things. So I'm an optimist, and I also am an egocentric person because I think that we technologists play a role in that. I actually believe that technology, in the end, with all of its problems, is a force for positiveness in the world. If for no other reason, then people become more aware of what's possible. And they get excited about it, and they don't want to settle for the situation they're in right now. I think it's got to happen. I believe that companies have a life cycle, and that healthy companies have a youth and an adolescence and a sort of a middle point in life when they're very dynamic, and then a more mature point where they maybe don't grow as fast, but they're tremendously experienced and capable, and then a declining period when the initiative is taken over by younger thinkers. But I really believe in creative destruction, and I think that it's the job of new companies. It's a little bit of a combative to go into the marketplace and say, we're better. We have a better solution. You don't have to do things that way anymore. Here's a new way to do it, and a society that's willing to abandon old ways of doing things and take on new ones. So I do think that technology, yes, it throws people out of work all the time, but they don't remain out of work for the rest of their lives. They go on to find something that is productive to do, and so the net result is some machine is doing what you used to do, liberating you to do something that a machine cannot do. And that should be a positive, even though, okay, in the short run, it can be very difficult, and that's why we have governments, because they're supposed to help cushion that, retrain people, make sure they don't starve to death in the meantime, motivate them to go on and do the next thing, run schools and universities and do the right things so that people don't just get put out to pasture. I'm a great extrapolist to predict the future. You kind of look at the past a little bit and say, where are we going? And I think that if you look at the American model of space, and particularly with respect to ITAR, the restrictions on technology flow out of the country, which I still have to live with, that has become a less and less valid idea, ITAR, and I think it will eventually go away, but like the Berlin Wall, takes a long time after the thing becomes irrelevant before you finally tear it down, right? And I think what is driving that is what I think will happen in the future, which is many, many more players can enter the space market and do innovative things, which is kind of what you're doing here, right? What was the chances of doing what you're doing here when space consisted of Apollo? Now, the technology is accessible enough that people all over the world in small countries are able to do really important things in space. And okay, I kind of see that in everything. I mean, that's obviously happened in the internet, where apps pop up and devices pop up all over the world. And I kind of think that that's the technological model for many, many things now. There's a decreasing number of things that only a very large organization or a very large country with large budgets can do, because we've succeeded in putting very capable tools in the hands of people who don't have access. I mean, the amount of computing power on your PC it far exceeds the best computers that money could buy of 20 years ago. And that means that you have all that power at your fingertips. And so I think those factors mean that what you're going to see in the world is much less, I wish, if you were saying what would I like the world to look like, much less hierarchical, much less the haves and the have-nots, much more that if you have the information, you're just as competitive as somebody else. You're just as capable of publishing a blog that's successful on the web if you live in Tanzania as if you live in New York. Nobody cares. And I'm hoping that's somewhat of an equalizer, that you don't have this great gradient between, like in the space world, we've always had the spacefaring nations and the non-spacefaring nations. There used to be two spacefaring nations. Now there's a lot of spacefaring nations. So I just see that trend, as kind of a healthy thing for the future. I'll tell you a few things. One of the things that I tell them is, as the engineers, the ones who are training to be engineers, is not to think of yourself as an engineer in one particular area. I was trained for a long time in music, and one of the things that you learn in music is you're not studying that piece of music, that piece of Mozart, or that piece of Tchaikovsky, or that piece of Manuel de Falla, so that you can perform that piece of Manuel de Falla. You're learning that as a way of training yourself to learn music. So that then someone calls you up and they say, Rick, we're doing this concert and we need this, and you know how to take that piece of music and learn it to a point where you could perform it on stage. And engineering education shouldn't be to make you into a specialist in a niche and then you're trapped within that niche. It should be a liberating thing where you have the ability to tackle problems. And what engineering really is that ability to make something which has never existed before, and whatever that is. And okay, there are certain things that are very far away from me. If I had to make software that never existed before, it's not, that would be very far away from me. But to find myself as a small satellite person, that's all I can do, would be also very limiting. And my thesis advisor said this to me once, that you're very lucky in life if you find something that's really meaningful to you and you can work on that. And that's really the goal. And you don't find that the day you graduate from school. You kind of float around and you do a whole bunch of stuff and it's somebody else's thing. Oh, my boss is really excited about that. Okay, well, whatever, I'll do that. I'm helping him. Eventually, I was lucky enough to find something that was really meaningful to me and that I found that other people weren't getting it. You know what I mean? And that it needed me. And that really changed everything for me. And that's how I became this addict about microsatellites, because to me, it was something that needed to be done, that was an obvious good for the world. And I think that experience of saying, look, people who are really turned on about their career and really enjoy it and throw themselves into it and glad to travel to Bulgaria to have a chance to talk about what I do, it didn't just come out of no place. I wasn't born that way. I floated around for 30, 35 years in life. And then the one good thing I'll say about myself is when I saw it, I recognized it. And I took the risk to do it. So that's, kind of my advice is if you're lucky enough to find something that touches your heart, it's just totally worth it. I wouldn't be an idiot about it. I think I was intelligent as an engineer, very much engineered every step to minimize the risk. But in the end, we launched the rocket, you know what I mean? Despite knowing that there were risks, that it might blow up. That was an incredible event because it didn't send a signal back at first. And all kinds of negative press came out. I mean, it was one of the worst. It was supposed to be one of the best days of your life, and instead it was one of the worst days of your life. Nobody knew why. The rocket company immediately blamed us because we were like an unknown in the space industry, that we must have done something wrong, and they hypothesized what we had done wrong. Our customer was a major national laboratory of the United States government. They weren't going to, and then there was this little contractor, Rick Fleeter's company, 13 guys. They obviously screwed up, right? And so that was, I don't know, that was like in June. And about 6 weeks later, we finally got the satellite turned on. We straightened out a whole bunch of little niggling, not major problems. One of which was that at that time we had no GPS in space. And so we were relying on the Air Force tracking and they were tracking the upper stage of the rocket instead of the satellite. So everybody was pointing their antennas in the wrong place. So we were never going to reach the satellite until you know, something happened. Somebody got the idea. How do we really know those are the right coordinates, the right capillarians, right? So it was a bunch of stupid things like that and some more significant things that had to be straightened out. And then the satellite went on. So the sense of victory on that day, of vindication, I think it was July 8th or something of 1992 or some date like that, it was fantastic. Because having been criticized and having people told all the reasons why this obviously couldn't have worked, and then it did work, was actually better than had it worked. Had it worked, everybody would have been like, yeah, okay, well, it worked. Well, the government spent X million dollars on a bunch of PhDs and they put together the satellite and it worked. But the fact that it didn't work, everybody said it didn't work because of this, it didn't work because of that. And then when it did work, it totally annulled all of those criticisms that we were, you know, that we were being hit with during those 6 weeks. So, but, you know, I had an employee who's very loyal to space and was very loyal to the company and everything. And she left aerospace for a while. She got so frustrated with the bureaucracy, with the bidding process, with the government, you know, all that kind of stuff. She went out into a software company, highly capable manager, and eventually came back to aerospace to work, you know, in my company. I guess I was, again, like you, a little bit good at convincing people that this was a cool thing to do. And she said to me, well, Rick, you're very convincing, but to tell you the truth, there is nothing on Earth like the day your satellite launches. It's fantastic. All that work, it all comes together and it launches, and it either works or it doesn't work, and you're really putting it on the line, your ability as a manager and as an engineer. And she said, I just didn't find that in any other field. And the idea that you have this thing in space that you and your teammates actually built, and then it launched and either worked or it didn't work, and it had to work, and there's nothing you can do to like plan B. You know, she said, it's just an experience that you don't have in any other field.